figure it's like old home week, right? We came back home because we never finished this.
We could put some potential caissons on here just so we all know what is possible.
Not quite. We were close. In a way, we know what we're looking for. We're definitely looking for more pieces of what we found earlier.
I mean, clearly that was one of the more interesting areas that we've drilled into in the money pit.
For more than 2 centuries, Oak Island has guarded its secrets beneath layers of rock, mud, and mystery. Many have tried to break through its defenses. Few have succeeded. But now, Rick Lagina stands on the brink of rewriting the island's history forever. What began as a lifelong obsession has turned into the most extraordinary discovery of his treasure-hunting career. After years of relentless digging, battling the island's legendary flood tunnels, and chasing leads that vanished into the depths, Rick's crew has finally struck gold. Literally, millions of dollars worth of gold and priceless artifacts have emerged from the earth, each piece a clue to an even bigger prize still waiting to be uncovered. This isn't just another chapter in the Oak Island mystery. It's the kind of breakthrough treasure hunters dream about. But as history has shown, every major find on the island comes with new questions, new dangers, and new theories that could change everything we thought we knew. Stay with us as we reveal how Rick's biggest gamble became his most stunning victory yet, and why this discovery could be just the beginning. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more Oak Island discoveries. The year was quiet on Oak Island, but for 16-year-old Rick Lagina, the place was alive with the hum of possibility. While other teenagers were chasing summer jobs or weekend fun, Rick was knee-deep in the salty air near Smith's Cove, working side by side with his 91-year-old grandfather. It wasn't just a summer pastime. It was a living bridge between generations. His grandfather wasn't an ordinary old man. He carried decades of stories, hard-earned skills, and the kind of wisdom you can't find in books. By that age, Rick had already heard every legend about Oak Island, the mysterious money pit, the flood tunnels, and the countless expeditions that ended in frustration. But instead of being discouraged, those stories lit a fire in him. That fire soon turned into action. Most people his age would be lucky to have a few $100s saved. Rick, however, made a bold choice. He poured $100,000 of his own money into an untouched section of Oak Island. For perspective, that's equivalent to the cost of a small house in Nova Scotia at the time, or nearly 50 times the average teenage savings. It was a gamble, but one backed by a family legacy and an unshakable belief that something valuable lay hidden beneath the island's stubborn soil. The statistics were not in his favor. Over 200 years of documented treasure hunts, dozens of companies, and millions of dollars had failed to crack Oak Island's code. Yet Rick saw those odds as a challenge, not a deterrent. For him, it wasn't just about gold or artifacts. It was about proving that persistence could triumph over centuries of mystery. And with that, Rick quietly began to take over the family's treasure-hunting legacy, one shovelful at a time. By now, Rick Lagina had learned one of the hardest truths in treasure hunting. You can't dig without dollars. Oak Island was unforgiving. Every shovel turned wasn't just effort, it was expense. And with $100,000 of his own money already sunk into the project, Rick faced a choice: dig slow and risk running out of funds, or find a way to keep the dream alive while chasing the big prize. He chose both. In a bold, strategic move, Rick split his crew into 2 distinct teams, each with a separate mission, pace, and payoff potential. The Wolf Cut crew was his long game. Stationed over an untouched section of Oak Island, their work was slow, methodical, and punishing. They drilled deep into soil that hadn't been disturbed for centuries, inching toward possible vaults or ancient structures. Every foot they dug was a test of patience. Machines strained, mud caked, and progress crawled at inches per day. Statistically, this was the crew most likely to hit a jackpot, but also the one most likely to burn through time and money before finding anything. On the other side was the Drift Cut crew, the fast movers. Their mission was simple: hunt for quick wins, scour areas with historical clues, unearth small but valuable finds, and convert discoveries into cash flow to keep fuel in the tanks, wages paid, and equipment running. It was a treasure hunting equivalent of keeping the lights on while building the cathedral. The numbers were stark. Wolf-Cut's operation could cost 3 times more per week than Drift-Cut, but Drift-Cut's success rate was 5 times higher for finding sellable artifacts. Rick knew the gamble meant walking a tightrope. One team funded the present, the other dug for the future. It was a risky balancing act, but Rick understood something most failed expeditions didn't. On Oak Island, you can't win the war unless you survive the battle. Oak Island didn't care about Rick Lagina's plans. It didn't care about timelines, budgets, or dreams. The ground was hard, frozen like concrete in some places, and mercilessly slow to yield any secrets. At the Wolf-Cut site, the crew fought a silent war against the earth itself. The drill teeth screamed as they bit into frozen layers, steam rising in the cold air. Progress wasn't measured in meters. It was measured in inches. One day of backbreaking work could mean just a few feet gained, and often, there was nothing to show for it but mud and exhaustion. The men knew their mission was the long game, but the lack of immediate results gnawed at morale. They were chasing a ghost through rock and clay. Meanwhile, across the island, the Drift-Cut crew faced a different kind of pressure: speed. Their job was to keep the expedition alive by finding valuables, artifacts, coins, anything that could be sold or used to attract investors. Every empty trench felt like a ticking clock. If they failed to deliver, fuel tanks would run dry, wages would go unpaid, and the bigger digs would grind to a halt. In the middle of it all was Rick. His boots were rarely clean. He was constantly moving between sites, clipboard in hand, radio crackling in his ear. One moment he'd be knee-deep in mud at Wolf-Cut, encouraging tired diggers. The next, he'd be over at Drift-Cut, scanning piles of freshly dug earth for a glint of something, anything, that justified the cost of another day. Every decision weighed on him. Push Wolf-Cut harder and risk equipment failure? Pull men from Drift-Cut and slow the money flow? On Oak Island, survival wasn't just about finding treasure. It was about finding it before the island bled you dry. For weeks, Oak Island had been unyielding, as if guarding its secrets out of spite. But on a cold morning, the air over Wolf-Cut felt different, charged, expectant. The drilling had been painfully slow, each borehole another gamble in the dark. Then, as the auger came up, the crew noticed something unusual in the muck. Flecks. Tiny, shimmering specks that caught the light just enough to make hearts skip. The geologist rushed over, examining the slurry under a magnifier. His voice cut through the hum of the machinery. "We've got gold." Not a rumor, not a legend. Real, measurable traces. They weren't nuggets, not yet, but scientifically undeniable proof that the Wolf-Cut ground held more than just dirt. For Rick, it was the first tangible sign that their long-term gamble might pay off. Before the news could fully sink in, a radio crackled from across the island. At Drift-Cut, the crew had been chasing a lead in an old depression near the shore. The trench collapsed slightly, revealing a pocket of dark, compacted soil. Moments later, a shout, then 2 more. They had uncovered several weathered coins, their designs still visible, alongside small but unmistakably valuable artifacts: iron tools, a clasp, and a fragment of what looked like an old navigational instrument. 2 wins. 1 day. Rick stood in the middle of it all, the weight of months of tension suddenly lighter. The Wolf-Cut find meant the long game had teeth. The Drift-Cut haul meant they could fund the next phase without scrambling for outside cash. The split-team strategy, criticized by some as a logistical nightmare, had just proven itself in spectacular fashion. That night, around a modest fire on the island, the crews celebrated. There was laughter, relief, and something even rarer on Oak Island: confidence. For the first time in a long time, Rick wasn't thinking about whether they'd survive another week. He was thinking about what they might uncover next. Oak Island had finally spoken, and it wasn't done yet. Word travels fast on Oak Island, but when the word is gold, it travels like wildfire. Within days of the breakthrough, whispers turned into headlines in the tight-knit treasure-hunting community. Rick Lagina hits pay dirt, some said. Others were more skeptical, calling it another Oak Island tease. But either way, the attention brought fresh interest, and with it, new opportunities. For Rick, success meant one thing: expansion. The days of small crews and cautious digging were over. Plans were drawn for a large-scale excavation, stretching across multiple high-potential zones. More workers were brought in, equipment rentals doubled, and the island buzzed with the noise of machinery from dawn until long past sunset. The Wolf Cut crew's drills now bit deeper than ever, pushing toward what they hoped was the source of the gold traces. Drift Cut, now flush with funds from their coin and artifact finds, widened their search area, combing shoreline depressions and shallow pits that had been ignored for decades. The operation was running like a well-oiled machine, or so it seemed. Then came the first breakdown. A critical piece of drilling equipment at Wolf Cut seized mid-operation, its hydraulic system failing under relentless strain. Repair estimates were staggering, not just in cost, but in time lost. Days of downtime on Oak Island were like weeks anywhere else. Every pause risked losing momentum, morale, and money. Soon, the excavator at Drift Cut began leaking hydraulic fluid, forcing the crew to work at half speed. It was as if the island, having given them a taste of victory, was now testing their resolve. Rick felt the pressure mounting again. Expansion had increased their reach, but it had also multiplied their vulnerabilities. Every hour of idle machinery was thousands of dollars gone, and replacing them meant cutting into the very profits that had allowed this growth. Still, standing still wasn't an option. Rick knew from history that Oak Island didn't reward hesitation. If the machinery broke, they would fix it. If the costs rose, they would find a way to pay them. Because in treasure hunting, the only real failure is stopping. By late afternoon, Rick Lagina stood at the edge of the Wolf Cut dig, staring down into the freshly exposed shaft. The readings had been promising for days. Traces of gold, strange metallic signatures, and now fragments of worked wood that looked far too old to be modern. This was no longer just a hole in the ground. It was a doorway. But on Oak Island, doorways don't stay open for long. The more promising a site becomes, the greater the risks, not just from nature, but from curious eyes, rival treasure hunters, and even opportunistic locals. The finds so far had already attracted visitors, some innocent, some not. A small boat had been spotted too close to the shoreline the night before, and one of the crew swore they'd seen a drone buzzing overhead. Rick made his decision on the spot. The site was going into lockdown. He called the crews together and laid it out clearly. From this moment, only a small, trusted circle would have physical access to the Wolf Cut dig. The perimeter was marked with heavy fencing and warning signs. Around-the-clock watch rotation was assigned, with 2 men stationed at all times, one at the entrance, one inside the machinery bay. Every piece of equipment was checked in and out under Rick's direct oversight. It wasn't just about secrecy, it was about control. Any leak, any stray photograph, and they could lose their edge. Even the Drift Cut crew, though still vital to funding the operation, was told they'd have no reason to approach the Wolf Cut zone unless summoned. Some grumbled, others understood, but everyone felt the shift in the air. This wasn't just another dig site anymore. This was the site, the place that could finally crack Oak Island's centuries-old mystery. That night, as the wind swept over the island, the dig site sat silent under the glow of floodlights. No one knew exactly what lay beneath, but one thing was certain. Whatever it was Rick intended to be the first to see it. 2 years. That's how long the sealed-off wolf-cut site remained under relentless excavation. Through summer heat, autumn storms, and brutal winter freezes, Rick Lagina's team chipped away at Oak Island's defenses. The work was slow, dangerous, and expensive, but it was also history in the making. The first major breakthrough came in the form of a tightly packed chest, its wood darkened and swollen from centuries underground. When pried open, it revealed thick gold ingots, each stamped with symbols that no one on the crew could immediately identify. The weight alone made the chest worth a fortune, but its markings hinted at a story far older than any bank ledger. Then came the artifacts, intricately crafted jewelry, a dagger with a jewel-encrusted hilt, and a set of navigational tools that experts later traced to 16th-century Portuguese explorers. Coins from multiple eras surfaced in quick succession: Spanish doubloons, English guineas, and even rare French écus d'or. The haul wasn't just valuable. It was proof that Oak Island had been a crossroads of wealth and mystery for centuries. By the time the second year closed, the team's tally was staggering. Millions of dollars worth of gold and artifacts recovered, cataloged, and secured. For Rick, it was validation on a scale he'd never dared to voice aloud. But perhaps his greatest move came after the treasure was counted. Instead of hoarding the gold, Rick gathered his crew, both wolf-cut and drift-cut, and made an announcement that no one saw coming. Each member would receive a share of the recovered gold, not as a bonus, but as a stake in the history they had unearthed together. Men who had endured sleepless nights, frostbitten hands, and years of uncertainty now held tangible proof that their sacrifices had mattered. The gold wasn't just wealth, it was legacy. And as the crew celebrated under the same stars that had watched over Oak Island's secrets for centuries, Rick knew the hunt wasn't over. The island still had stories to tell. For a brief moment, it seemed like Oak Island had finally loosened its grip on its treasures. Gold was flowing out of the ground, artifacts were piling up in the cataloging tent, and morale was at an all-time high. But Rick Lagina knew better than to think the island would surrender without a fight. The first blow came when a critical winch cable snapped during a deep shaft lift at Wolfcut. The load dropped several feet, damaging the casing and bending the support frame. Repairs would take days, and every hour of downtime meant money lost and progress stalled. Then came the blockages. A promising tunnel, mapped by ground-penetrating radar, became a nightmare of collapsed debris. Each attempt to clear it only caused more soil to cave in, swallowing equipment and forcing the crew to shore up the walls before work could continue. And just when they thought they had the situation under control, nature struck. A sudden, heavy rainfall, fed by high tides, overwhelmed the pumps and flooded one of the main excavation pits. Water poured in faster than it could be pumped out, threatening to wash away weeks of delicate work. For 2 days, crews worked in shifts, pumping, bailing, and reinforcing barriers just to keep the site alive. It was the kind of week that could break a lesser operation. But for Rick's team, it became a rallying point. Repairs were made, stronger equipment brought in, and safety protocols tightened. When the machinery roared back to life, it was with a vengeance. The results were immediate. Within weeks, the crews were pulling up their largest hauls yet. Ornate chalices, solid gold coins in pristine condition, and a trove of tools so well preserved they looked as though they had been set down only yesterday. The message was clear. Oak Island would fight to keep its secrets, but if you could endure the punishment, the rewards were unlike anything else on Earth. By now, Rick Lagina had seen Oak Island at its best and worst, glittering victories, crushing setbacks, and everything in between. But as the latest haul was laid out on the long wooden tables inside the cataloging tent, even he was struck silent. Gold chalices, jewel-studded relics, navigational instruments older than the island's recorded history, and something else. A sealed, iron-bound chest, heavier than anything they had pulled from the earth so far. The experts on site believed it might contain more than just gold, perhaps historical documents, maps, or artifacts capable of rewriting history. The weight of the find was both literal and symbolic. That night, Rick walked the perimeter of the Wolf Cut site alone. The floodlights hummed in the darkness, casting long shadows over the excavation. He thought of his 91-year-old grandfather, of the teenage boy who once dreamed of solving the Oak Island mystery, and of the decades of failed expeditions before him. By morning, his mind was made up. Public tours, media visits, and casual access to the richest area on Oak Island would end immediately. Fences went up, guard rotations doubled. Even trusted crew members were reassigned unless their presence was absolutely essential. The official statement was simple: for the safety and preservation of the site. But privately, Rick knew the truth. This wasn't just about protecting artifacts from thieves. This was about safeguarding what could be one of the most valuable treasure caches in recorded history until it could be properly excavated and documented. The decision was met with mixed reactions. Some accused him of secrecy, others praised his caution. But Rick didn't care. He wasn't in this for applause. As the final gate swung shut and the locks clicked into place, the island was quiet once again, guarded, patient, and waiting. Somewhere beneath the soil, history was sleeping, and Rick intended to be the one to wake it. The moment word leaked about Rick Lagina's lockdown of Oak Island's richest dig site, speculation exploded. Online forums lit up with theories, some grounded in history, others deep in conspiracy. Was the treasure authentic? Or was it, as a few cynics claimed, an elaborate stunt designed to boost television ratings and investor interest? Skeptics pointed to the timing of certain discoveries, suggesting they were too perfect, too dramatic. Believers countered with the historical evidence, the sheer scale of the finds, and the undeniable age of the artifacts already verified by experts. Social media became a battleground, with fans and doubters clashing over what was real and what was rumor. On the island, Rick kept his distance from the noise. He'd been in this game long enough to know that speculation was part of the territory. Treasure hunting was as much about mystery as it was about discovery, and Oak Island had never been short on either. Privately, Rick knew the truth. The gold was real, the artifacts were real, and so was the danger: collapsing tunnels, flooding chambers, and the constant threat of equipment failure or theft. This was no staged drama. It was a high-stakes pursuit where one wrong move could cost lives, not just fortunes. Still, the whispers only fueled the legend. Theories ranged from the treasure of the Knights Templar to hidden spoils of pirate kings, from royal ransom gold to the long-lost archives of an ancient civilization. Each idea added another layer to the Oak Island mythos, ensuring the story would live on, whether or not the full truth was ever revealed. As the season drew to a close, Rick stood at the shore, the island quiet under the fading light. He didn't need to convince anyone. Those who believed would keep watching. Those who doubted would keep talking. And somewhere beneath the soil, the next chapter of Oak Island's mystery was already waiting. Watch next and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for joining us on this discovery.